Hi, I'm Karen Morgan. I'm a member of the Executive Council of AARP Maryland, and this is Protect Week 2025. We are having a lot of conversation with people who have either been affected by fraud or who are on the battle lines against fraud. And this is one of the series of conversations that we'll be featuring all week. Social media interviews, we'll also be doing shred events. We did a kickoff press conference, and we're providing a host of lots of information on our website, aarp.org/Maryland/Protect Week. So please go there for more information. With me today are our guests, Jane Dean, who was targeted by fraud and who has become a fierce advocate speaking out against fraud. Paul Greenwood, former district attorney, state attorney? Deputy DA in San Diego, who's become an advocate against fraud and started out as a pioneer in prosecuting these types of cases and is now an AARP ambassador. And then Ralph Sapia, who is also someone who was targeted by fraud and has become an advocate as a result. So thank you so much for being here, everybody. We really appreciate it. So, Paul, let me start with you. As I said, you're a pioneer in this space. So you were told to start prosecuting these cases at a time when hardly any prosecutors were taking these cases seriously. What was it about these cases that made you decide to go after them with like full force when so many other prosecutors were not?
Well, I was fortunately raised by two parents who were part of that World War II generation, Karen, and I believe that that is the finest generation. So when I found myself in this position of starting a whole new fraud program where the victims were over 65, most of the victims that I came in touch with were of my parents' age group, over 75, 80, 85. And I kept thinking to myself, how would I feel if this was my own mother, who had been exploited, who had been targeted, who had been identified as a potential victim? It would have made me angry, and so it did. It lit a fire in me, and that fire has continued. And even since I've retired after 25 years from prosecuting these cases, now with my focus on prevention, that fire is still in my belly, and I just want to be able to share whatever I've learned along the way with others in the hope that maybe somebody will avoid becoming a victim.
Thank you so much. It's so important. So, Jane, let me go to you now. You, in your remarks, you've been very specific about telling people that they need to stop. What do you mean by that?
Well, the way that the scammers work is they get you into a heightened emotional state which supersedes your logical and rational mind. And so therefore you don't have time to think about what it is that they are doing to you. And so I encourage people to, if they find themselves in that heightened emotional state, just stop and not respond to whatever it is that got them there, the email, the text, or the phone call, so that it gives them time to say, whoa, wait a minute, what's going on here? And try to dial back their response. Because when people react in a heightened emotional state, then that's when poor decisions are made.
Thank you so much, Jane. Now, let me go to our next guest, Ralph. Now, Ralph, you've said in sort of half-joking way that you're an attorney, you were targeted by fraud, so you may not be the best advertisement for the legal profession. We all push back on that, thinking you're the perfect advertisement because you're proof that fraud can happen to anyone. So, in your particular circumstance, can you talk about what was going on emotionally at the time? Because it sounds like a lot was going on, and that's one reason why these criminals were able to convince you to do what they wanted.
Yeah, I mean, that's 100% correct. I felt like, as I look back on it, I thought maybe they were watching me because I had a very close friend, almost like a sister, in my car. She's still in her late 70s, and all I could imagine was getting pulled over because I forgot to put a blinker on or something, and being arrested on a Saturday and poor Joe being stuck, on Hagerstown all weekend long. I mean, I really did feel like they were watching me, and the interesting thing was in the beginning they didn't ask me for any money, which if they come right out and asked for it, I probably would have identified it immediately. But yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, it's just, when you're really concerned about the welfare of somebody and they might be in a vulnerable situation, you don't want to be responsible for that. So that's sort of top of mind. So it sounds like a fight or flight situation to me.
100%. I mean, that's what they did. I mean, somebody used the expression, they sort of hijack your amygdala. I mean, that's what they do. You just go into this, okay, I've got to be in the defensive. I've got to solve this problem. This is an urgent problem. I potentially someone. Now, in my case, it was simply I was going to get potentially arrested, which is not easy, but it wasn't like my grandchild or my child or something, which is, as people have called me to sort of report these things, that's what a lot of these scammers utilize. It's your granddaughter, please don't tell anybody, don't mention what's happening to you to anyone. That should be a big red flag.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have to tell people.
Yes, you certainly do. So let me pass the mic to Jane because I want to follow up with something. So Jane, in your story, which you so eloquently talked about, at one point you said that the scammers told you not to trust any bank tellers. But the third bank teller you went to, you did tell him what was going on. What was it, can you just describe more about what was it that the bank teller did or said, or that person's manner that convinced you to talk about what you were specifically told not to talk about?
Well, actually, that's a great question, because the first two banks that I went to, the tellers were not, there was no suspicion at what I was asking for. But the third branch of the bank that I went to, the teller, when I asked for a certain amount of money, she said, well, we don't have that much. Hold on one second. And I think at that time, she went and spoke to her manager, and the manager came out and spoke to me and asked me to come back to his office. And then when I was in his office, he was very gentle and asking very non-specific questions, but then he kind of went a little bit further, and then he said, what's going on? And I've been instructed not to say anything to anybody, and I couldn't trust anyone in the bank. But at that point, my stress level was so high that I broke down into tears, and I told him everything that was going on. And I had my phone turned on at the same time so the scammer could hear this conversation taking place. And he pulled up Zillow, the address of where I was supposed to send the cash, or where I had sent the cash. And he showed it to me, and it was an empty house at a new construction site. And he said, you're being scammed. And that was what brought me out from underneath the ether, and I was able then to, say, oh my God, and then react differently after that. So, does that answer your question?
Yes, it definitely does. And fortunately, you were able to turn your phone off finally too, right? I mean, that was the thing. The phone was on the entire time.
Yes, the phone was on the entire time, but I did say to the bank manager, may I step out for a moment and uh-oh, I think I turned it off. Did I turn it off? No. Okay, and so I stepped out and I told the scammer that, what do I do now? And he said, go to a different branch, okay? So I went back in, but by this time I was out from underneath the ether. And he reconfirmed that I was being scammed, and he told me to hang up, okay? But by that time, a police officer had come into his office, and the police officers, and the phone was still turned on, but the police officer's radio, it squawked, that funny noise that it makes? And as soon as the scammer heard that squawk, he hung up.
So, Paul, ask you, when you hear a story like this, we have a criminal justice system that is intended to address these types of issues. Apparently, we're not doing a great job, but we're not doing nearly enough. So when you hear Jane's story, what do you think, what can you say about the gaps that still exist in our criminal justice system that keep us from more vigorously prosecuting these crimes?
Thank you, and this has been one of the benefits of being with Jane today, is to hear her story, but also for me to be asking Jane, well, what happened after that police officer came to the bank? And sadly, and this happens across the country, that they sent Jane a report, a letter, after they took the initial report, a few weeks later saying, sorry what happened to you, but there's nothing we can do. The point is there is something that can be done. There is something that should be done, because in Jane's case there are 2 physical addresses that I now have possession of, thanks to Jane, where the money was sent by UPS to those 2 locations in California. So there is much more that could have been done, should have been done, and I hope still will be done once I get involved with these 2 agencies. And I think what it comes down to, Karen, is what we need in every police agency is one police officer or one detective who's got the passion for elder fraud issues. That's what it takes. And I've noticed that. I always look around the room. I'm looking for... Now, today was different. We had a press conference, and I looked around the room, and there were lots of people on fire for this subject, right?
Yes.
But in a police station, in a law enforcement agency, I'm always looking, whether it's someone in the back row or somebody that you grab their attention, and they're beginning to think along the lines that I started to think, how would I feel if this had impacted not Jane, but my own mother, you see? And that's where we've got to get personal. And I think it also helps when we roll out training for these first responding officers, what questions to ask, how to make a report, what steps not to take. You know, Jane this morning talked, and you talked about how not to talk to a victim of fraud. Police need to know that too. And the last thing they should be thinking is, well, it's your own fault. You shouldn't have fallen for it. No, we need to focus on the activities of the suspect. And one final thing I would say is this, what I've learned. It's not so much on the amount of the loss, Karen. It's on the conduct of the perpetrator. If we allow the perpetrator to get away with it, in this case, they're going to do it again, and they probably are still doing it until we hold them accountable.
And that's exactly right. That's why it's so important that when we talk about this, we turn the focus onto the person responsible for creating the issue, the crime, the devastation. It's the criminal who's doing it, not the victim. So another piece of the puzzle, I think, has to do with legislation. And Ralph, that's where I will turn to you, because you were instrumental in helping to get legislation passed in 2025 that regulates cryptocurrency ATMs. So why don't you tell us something about that?
Thanks. What was fascinating to me was, and I've gone back and I've looked at the phone call, the phone record. I hung up at 11:08. I was on the phone with my bank at 11:09, and they said that money was gone. It was out of my account. And I remember saying to the folks at the bank, I get checks from insurance companies all the time, and they hold them for 2 days. Why? I've never traded. I can't order an Uber with my bank cards. He's like, well, Uber's used in scams a lot. I said, so are Bitcoins. I've never transacted in Bitcoin. And I really contacted Senators Bilo and Hettleman, who were just fantastic and really championed this, to address the banks and to get the banks to maybe put a 24-hour hold on these crypto transactions. But what ended up coming out is that we're only the second state in the country with a bill that limits the amount that you can take out, that a first-time user can take out of a crypto machine. There will be disclosures on the crypto machine, sort of encouraging people that if you don't know this person or you've not conducted business with this person, you should not be conducting business with it. And what's been really fascinating the crypto, the legitimate crypto world, they support this. I mean, they don't want the scams, although, I mean, I have to park a little bit of this for because they know it exists. But, you know, they supported the legislation. So $2,000 is a cap for a first-time user in Maryland, effective July 1, I think.
Yes.
And, you know, it's still a lot of money, but it's not going to, you know, probably mean the difference between, you know, keeping your electricity on. So I'm very excited that it sort of helped to turn that in, and I appreciate everybody's support for it.
Well, we appreciate your work on that because you testified virtually and you were the one who called your legislators, which is something we don't often think about, but what state legislation can be part of the solution to this problem. So, Paul, let me go back to you. So we have these gaps. What do you think is the first thing that, if the state really wants to tackle fraud seriously, what's the first thing that they should do?
Well, we need to get the attention of our local, state and federal partners in terms of the legislation and the people who make the laws and who have the budget strings too. I think one of the statistics I always throw out is that by the year 2035, there'll be more people in this country over the age of 65 than under the age of 18. So I think people need to be aware of that and understand that fraud is not going to go away, it's only going to get worse. It is a pandemic, or an epidemic as you call it, Karen, and so I think we need the legislatures to put monies where it needs to be on the front lines, to train more prosecutors, to train more law enforcement, to train adult protective services as the first responders, to make sure that banks and credit unions, as you said, Ralph, are more vigilant and more aware of the red flags that coexist with these frauds. And I think, and this is why I'm so excited to be part of AARP's programs, AARP is trying to bring coalitions together. I mean, this morning we had the Attorney General, the US Attorney, we had the FBI, we had the Department of Labor, we had the Ombudsman's Office, we had APS, all in the room together, right? Yes. And that's what it's going to take. It's going to take local, state, and federal partners around the table. And I'm an optimist. I think we're learning much better. We're learning as more and more folks like Ralph and Jane come forward. We're learning what to look for, how to prevent it, where the gaps are. And so I'm actually optimistic that, especially in a place like Maryland, we're going to do well in combating this crime. But we've got to do it together as a team and not have turf war or jurisdictional rivalry. We want to be in it all together, but knowing what each other's role is very, very important.
Absolutely. Now, as part of that, speaking of pieces of the puzzle, AARP has initiated something that's very exciting in terms of trying to pull these pieces together so we can have actionable prosecutorial cases, the National Elder Fraud Crime Commission. So tell us about that.
This is very exciting, and it's just in the early stages of infancy, and it's basically going to be a clearinghouse for reports of fraud that are being put into ic3.gov and through FTC and through local law enforcement agencies. And we're encouraging those agencies to filter these reports through to this national center, which is being funded thanks to AARP and Walmart and Amazon and Google. And it goes to an ex-FBI agent who's actually from San Diego, Brady Finter, who's organizing a whole team of auditors to screen these reports. And the idea is to try to find some common denominators of suspects' names or phone numbers that link in with the numbers from the victims. And hopefully, if they are able to do that, they can then present a package to the federal prosecutors, who typically have said in the past, well, unless it reaches a certain threshold, we can't deal with it. Now we're hoping that by Brady's group presenting these cases, the federal prosecutors will be more inclined to take them and run with them and hopefully file charges. So this is something to look for, and anybody can find out more about this. It's a very easy website to remember. I can remember it. Wow. FightElderFraud.org. FightElderFraud, or one word, FightElderFraud.org. Look that up, and you'll be able to learn all about this very exciting initiative.
Okay, thank you so much. That is an exciting initiative, because that's been a huge stumbling block. There are pieces of these cases, and those pieces can be part of a huge iceberg. And unless someone's willing to put the iceberg together, we don't know the extent of the fraud that's going on. So we need to start wrapping up now. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here today. We really appreciate it. So let me go to you, Ralph. If there's just something that you could say, because you're going to get the mic in a minute. So if there's something that you could say to people to help them deal with fraud, or to help them prevent fraud from coming into their lives, what would you say to them?
Well, first I say get rid of your smartphone and then disconnect from the world, but that's probably not realistic. Look, I think if you get something that just comes out of the blue, the special agent that was here from the FBI, something that just comes out of the blue for no reason, it's probably a scam. And if they tell you don't hang up the phone, it's probably a scam. Just hang up the phone. If it's real, they're going to call back. And if you don't recognize the number, I was saying this, now the big fear is the AI and then capturing your voice. If a number comes up that you don't recognize, I simply don't answer the phone really anymore. They'll call back or they'll leave a voicemail, right? I mean, that's just it. So just, and then I would also ask people, don't beat up or belittle people who are, because people really are victims. I mean, I joke about it a little bit, but I listened to Jane's story, very, very moving, very emotional, and I don't want to speak for her, but it took a big toll, and it's hurtful. I mean, it's a type of abuse, and it's really unfortunate.
That's why we've started calling it transnational organized crime, because that's how serious it is. Paul, I think I'll let you have the last word. Can you pass the mic to Jane? And Jane, tell us what you would like to tell anyone else who's thinking about fraud or being targeted by fraud.
Well, shall I do it like I did in today's press conference?
Yes.
You have the mic.
Okay, I've got the mic. Well, my advice to those of you out there who are watching this, listening to this, is stop. Do not do anything if you're in a heightened emotional state due to a text, email, or phone call. That's my advice.
And Karen, one of the things I loved about being a prosecutor in a trial is the prosecutor gets the last word in front of a jury. So thank you for allowing me to be a prosecutor right now. But first of all, I want to thank Ralph and Jane for removing the stigma that is often attached to being a victim of fraud. And you have empowered people, and you will empower people to come forward, because for me, silence is the biggest barrier that we constantly fight against. And it's what the perpetrators rely on to get away with their criminal activity. And I just want to say my word is to the adult children of older parents. Stay in touch with them. And if you see a change in their routine, in their behavior, in anything like that, make it your responsibility to inquire and find out. Unfortunately, this crime will go undetected.
Okay. Thank you so much. And that is going to wrap up our conversation today at the beginning of Protect Week 2025. Please, look at this again. You can watch it again as much as you want. Take in Jane's story, Ralph's story, Paul's experience, our passion about this issue. It's that important. It can be financial homicide. That's how serious it is. And so we need to stop it. Go to AARP.org/Maryland/Protect Week for more information. We have shred events. We have more social media interviews with experts on this issue. We have our kickoff press conference. We have written articles. We have all kinds of resources that you can go to so that you can protect yourself and help keep your family and your friends safe. So once again, thank you, Jane. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Ralph. And thank you, AARP Maryland. And stay safe.